What is up, Soul Fam? It's Sandar from Substance Over Style, and welcome to a new video. Okay, so today I was going to talk about male body image, but I actually got a really good suggestion for another topic on my last video where I was talking about how to decolonize your mind in the current climate that we're in, where everybody's Black Lives Matter, and you know, some people think it's a psyop to cause racial division. But we need to do the work, because as we change ourselves, we help to heal the collective, and then we create a new society, because we are society. Okay, so Alina Kerr commented, "Love the video. These few days I recognise my own racist behaviour towards myself and others. I grew up in Germany, still living here, and I always compared myself to the European standard. I even had a phase when I was 10 or so that I always hid my hair, or I always wanted to be white, etc. And it's still hard for me not to compare myself. Maybe you could do a video about internalized racism and how to heal yourself from it. Greetings from Berlin." Yeah, internalized racism is huge, and I think I don't see that many people talking about it, but I mean, yeah, anybody who's involved in anti-racism and decolonization work will talk about it, but I don't think it's talked as much about, you know, healing yourself from within and learning to love yourself, as much as kind of, you know, externalizing everything and blaming your oppressor, because the work of decolonization actually involves both. It involves within and without. You can't, you know, as you heal your insides, then what gets reflected to you externally is a mirror of what's going on. So because I talked about that in the previous video, that would also explain why she has asked me to expand more on that. Now, I just want to put a disclaimer that this is not to say that, you know, if you heal yourself and you learn to love yourself and you learn to heal all of your internalized racism and fully accept yourself and, you know, charge what you're worth and all of that stuff and really go for things and, you know, refuse to see any obstacles in your way, that will just cure the problem of racism just on its own, because it doesn't work like that. It will definitely help. It will create a ripple effect, that as you start to really embody the fullness and completeness of who you are in all your magnificence, it will challenge people's perceptions about your kind, and that will help to create a further ripple effect that will you know, have a very far-reaching effect in which we can actually like heal these issues for good. Now, part of internalized racism, I think, you know, I haven't really made any notes on this, so I'm probably going to be jumping around quite a lot. One of my favorite pieces of content, pieces of art that was created on this subject is Akala's song Find No Enemy. It's my favorite song from him, and you know, I think that you should just pause this video and go listen to it right now, or just have it on in the background, because it's a beautiful song written by a beautiful person. I love Akala. And definitely go and also look at his other content. He's like one of the most prolific, you know, thought leaders of our generation. He's talked a lot about racism, classism, decolonization. He's talked about how the British school system has perpetuated racism by, you know, omitting certain crimes committed by, you know, the empire against its former colonies, specifically when it relates to the Caribbean and South Asia, because they haven't really talked about, you know, the fact that a lot of Britain's wealth comes from you know, raping the Caribbean, raping Africa, raping India for its wealth and resources, and inviting people from those former colonies to come to England to you know, seek employment and, you know, follow the wealth that has come out of their countries. A lot of, you know, white people don't necessarily know why there's all these black and brown faces in England, and they just assume that we're all immigrants, not realizing that we're actually part of the Commonwealth. I mean, I myself am mixed race, so I'm British by descent, but, you know, that's how the mixing happened in the first place. You know, people came over and then they mixed, and, you know, a lot of people just think that, you know, black and brown people came to England for just to kind of as economic migrants, not realizing that they were actually following the wealth of their own countries. So he talks a lot about that. And if you are going to deprogram yourself from your own internalized racism, you need to learn your history, and you need to learn where your ancestors came from, and you need to learn that story. It's not just so that, you know, you can say to stupid racist people, well, actually this is how it is, although that helps. It's just so that you can know in your own heart that you're not a second-class citizen, that, you know, just because they think that everything that they have just came from their own hard work or their parents' hard work, and, you know, and I'm not, you know, disputing that people don't work hard for everything that they have. They need to understand more of a historical context of inherited wealth and things like that. So things like, you know, documentaries that I would watch, like I watched Britain's Forgotten Slave Owners, and it talked about how a lot of it wasn't just, you know, super rich people that had slave plantations and benefited from, you know, the human resources that were, you know, the very life force that was stolen from people, like their actual lives. People were actually stolen, and that's where a lot of the wealth in England and America comes from, because there were reparations to pay to slave owners, but not to the actual people who were enslaved and their descendants. And reparations do need to be paid. Like, let's be very clear about that. Reparations need to be paid to everybody whose ancestors were enslaved. They need to be paid to every country that was colonized. You know, that's my personal opinion, and, you know, if you don't agree, I'm sure you agree, you know, Elena, who I'm talking to right now. But yeah, learn your history and learn how your ancestors came to be in the country that you're in. So I'm going to tell you a story about a girl that I knew, that I met here in Bali. She was French Moroccan. She did not identify as French at all, even though her passport's French and she spoke French. And I've met a lot of, when I've been traveling, I've met a lot of French people who are of North African descent who seem to hate France and all of that. And that's a journey that you might go through, because as you start to learn the lies that were told to you in school, or the lies or the truths that were omitted, you may go through a process of anger. And as you reclaim your identity, your ancestral identity that, you know, the dominant culture is always trying to box you in and you're constantly trying to fight out of. I mean, for me, I definitely went through that when I was, you know, growing up. I hated constantly being put in the box, you know. Like people would be like, oh, where are you from? I'm from North London. No, but where are you really from? I'm really from North London. No, but where are your parents from? And it's just like, do you want me to just like give you their number? You can talk to them instead. Because, you know, I thought we were having a conversation where we're getting to know each other, but clearly you just want to know about my parents. Like, we can just skip this and you can talk to them. But at the same time, like, you know, we can be like, oh, we're all the same, but you're not the same. You're not the same. Don't deny, when you actually start, you know, learning about your history and learning about, you know, the struggles of your ancestors, how they came to be in the land that you're in now, you will really start to reconnect to that, and you'll realize you're not the same, and there's a difference between you and the people around you. I have a very different perspective from the average white person in Britain, and it's because of my ancestry, and it's because of my parents and their struggle, and my grandparents and their struggle, and the way that they were able to see beyond the lies of every culture. The word culture has the word cult in it, has certain stories that it tells itself, and it's not giving a complete picture of what really happened, you know. It will tell history according to its own perspective. So if you're a minority of a certain culture, you will always be able to see through that bullshit. And that was the same story with my friends, who I've got three particular people who I've got to know quite well, who were all of North African descent, and yeah, they hated France and they did not identify as French, even though that was what their passport said, that they were a citizen of France. Because generally, when a country colonizes another country, or you know, yeah, when they colonize it, or they basically, you know, take the resources, it's generally like a, you know, they'll either occupy that land or they'll have a colony which they then, you know, siphon resources from. So, you know, France did that with North Africa, with Morocco and Algeria, absolutely destroyed and raped and pillaged those countries. And in order to do that and to justify it, they will have to create a certain narrative about the people that come from that country. They will have to create an entire system of racism. So, you know, whatever lies that they come up to justify that these people are heathen, it's basically like the white man's burden. You know, of Rudyard Kipling had this white man's burden that Akala talks about as well. You should listen to his interviews, where, you know, the Europeans will generally think that they're going and helping to civilize these people. Missionaries, that was one way that, you know, white saviorism. White saviorism is one of the biggest evils on this planet, like, you know, and it's something that really needs to be unpacked, because I still see it a lot, and I'm seeing it a lot at the moment, where people are going, yeah, let's uplift melanated voices, and it's just like, I don't want you to just like give me a platform just because you've suddenly realized that, you know, you've been excluding me and now suddenly you want to let me into your club. Nah, fuck that. Like, if you couldn't see me, if you couldn't see my humanity before, I don't want anything to do with you. Like, I don't need that validation anymore from white European people, because I've done the work to unpack my own internalized racism, that I don't need it anymore. Like, in the beginning, the journey will be about how can I love myself and fully embody more of my self-worth and my self-esteem, so that I can be accepted and move up in the world, and so that I can get better opportunities and things like that. But on this journey, and for me, like, it was all about, you know, traveling and coming to other countries and, you know, just decolonizing my mind in so many different ways. You know, I traveled to India and I lived in India, worked as a model for a while. I traveled to Pakistan and worked in Pakistan as a model, in Thailand, and, you know, and I saw white supremacy in action in all these countries. And it was massively eye-opening. And initially the journey was about, you know, me seeking better opportunities in countries where my skin color would be better accepted, so that I could, you know, have a better portfolio and, you know, all the big Condé Nast magazines, so that when I went back to England I would be more easily accepted. But once I went there, I was just like, I don't give a shit about them anymore. Like, I really couldn't care less whether they accept me now or not. Like, now I actually do quite well in England and I make decent money whenever I go back, but I'm just being successful in London doesn't super interest me anymore, because I've realized that, like, they told the whole world, they traveled all over the world and colonized all these other countries and told them about Great Britain, and the only reason why they did that was because it's great, miserable, like, yeah, okay, it's good for farming potatoes, but, like, there was really not that much going on there. So, you know, they had to come to India to get, like, the silks and the spices and, you know, the beautiful textiles, and they continue to go to other countries to get stuff done, because other countries have got really rich cultural heritage. You know, they've got incredible weather, sunshine, you know, the fruit that grows, you know, in the tropic, like, I'm in Bali at the moment, the fruit that grows here is, like, far superior to whatever will grow in the British Isles. Thailand has the best fruit in the world. It's completely unbeatable. Once you start traveling and actually going back to the land of your ancestors, you might realize you don't even want to go back home. So yeah, like, what was I saying? I knew this was going to be a rambly one. Yeah, so these friends of mine, they were just, like, really, you know, trying to reclaim their North African identity, because they had really started to decolonize their minds, and they started to research their history, not just their own history, but a history of, you know, all the other former colonies, like how Britain's basically colonized more than 50% of the world. There's actually a really good book that you should read. It's called Web of Deceit by Mark Curtis, and it's got a foreword by John Pilger. John Pilger's fucking crazy, incredible journalist. He's one of the few actual real journalists that actually do investigative journalism, so you should also have a look at his work. He does a lot of stuff on decolonisation, because he went through his own awakening. He's white Australian, so European Australian, And yeah, he basically started realizing that they were living on stolen land, that they're not taught about it in the school systems, and he started basically unpacking everything that had gone on in that area, not just in Australia but also in the Marshall Islands, and you know, stuff that's happening in Indonesia at the moment as well. And you know, it's not just European countries that colonize, like, let's be clear, like, you know, I'm not saying that like white people are just like these evil monsters and nobody else does shit like that. Like, you know, I see racism as anti-blackness. Like, I know that black people can be racist towards other groups like Chinese and South Asians, but generally I feel like it's a war on melanin, really. Generally, the darker skinned you are, and it's not just people of African descent, but the darker skinned people in any country. If you go to China, you'll see black people in China. You go to India, you'll see black people in India. So yeah, like, also research melanin, like, and it's difficult because there's no like one resource where it's going to unpack everything about melanin for you. It's literally like every single conspiracy, or you know, whenever you're seeking truth, you'll find it like fragmented into loads of different puzzles, and you'll have to join the dots. So you know, I'm trying to learn about melanin from all these different resources, but yeah, there's something going on with this substance in our skin and in our hair that we don't fully understand. It's like, you know, it's a neurotransmitter, it absorbs light, like it's a liquid crystal. You know, it's involved in, it's got some connection with melatonin, possibly DMT as well. It's in many substances. It can be found in mushrooms. I've also been researching whether it's got any connection to the ink in the psilocybin mushroom. So when you do the, you know, the magic mushrooms, they bruise blue, right? And then you take them as psychedelic. So, you know, I haven't really, like, I'm not an expert on it, but you know, in the last video where I linked certain black creators that you should follow, one of them is Ashura Star Goddess, and I've posted a link to her YouTube channel, and you should go and watch her videos because she talks a lot about melanin and the electromagnetic spectrum, and I've learned a lot from her. She's super knowledgeable about these things. And also Forbidden Knowledge, Billy Carson, he talks a lot about occult science, and yeah, not from a white person's perspective. You know, he's got a very global perspective, so it's not like, you know, he's talking about it from just a black person's perspective, but he is black, so he will talk about, you know, race and things like that, and you know, human evolution and human history and how we came to be and where we came from, you know, how we were even seeded on this planet. You know, it goes really deep. So I mean, that's definitely been my journey anyway. The more I researched this, the more I started to uncover like all this stuff about our history that had just been hidden from us. And definitely, yeah, like connecting with your ancestors is super important. I mean, for me, I had to unpack a lot of the ways in which I had tried to act like a white girl and tried to show that I wasn't like those other Desi girls. And just looked down upon people of my own race. Like, I remember my mum taking me to, I'm really ashamed to admit it actually, she took me to Southall, and it was like, oh my god, it was like being in India or something. Like, there was not a single white face, it was all just brown people. And I look back on that and I was so racist. Like, I had so much self-hatred that I just could not even be around these people. I hated being in that environment surrounded by so many people that looked like me, thinking that I looked just like them, and I was just like, surely I don't look like these people. And that is one of the side effects of growing up in a really racist society. Like, you know, Pakistani people in Britain are not looked upon well, especially post 9/11, but even before that, I mean, my mum tells me stories, like when I talked to her about, you know, 9/11 and how much it affected racism in this country, and she was just like, you don't even know what the fuck you're talking about. Like, yeah, okay, we made some progress and then it got a bit worse after 9/11, but she was just like, I used to have to put a nail in the letterbox She used to have to wake up early in the morning before the postman would come, so that's like 6 a.m, and take the nail out of the letterbox that she'd had to put in the night before because white racists in our neighborhood were putting petrol in through the letterbox, or feces, and just like setting the thing on fire. Which, you know, I had no idea about. But also we were living in Leighton in East London, which was like a really racist area, and like my parents worked really, really hard to save money so that they could afford to buy a house in North London, which is a much more sort of affluent neighbourhood with sort of less racial tensions. And I'm not saying that like it's just poor people who are racist. I'm just saying that the racism becomes very exacerbated by the close quarters in which you live, and when people are fighting over resources, it's much more likely to become, you know, antagonistic. And there's also a lot of self-segregation that happens in poorer communities, like the problems that you're having in you know, that were recently exposed in Rotherham, where you've got like, you know, a community of South Asians and very, very traditional, very conservative South Asians living right next to, you know, white people who are also very, very working class. And when there's mixing, you know, not good cross-cultural mixing, and then we had all these problems with, you know, these teenage boys raping these young white teenagers. And yeah, it's really, really messed up. Like, that's what happens when you've got like cultures mixing in, like the worst aspects of those cultures mixing, because we are being programmed, like every culture is being programmed. And being able to, if you're a mixed race person, or if you're a person of one culture that's grown up in another culture, you've got a very, very unique opportunity to be able to take the best elements from that culture and the best elements from that culture, and actually, to be honest, I do think that people who are cross-cultural, either mixed race people or people who grow up in a different culture, are going to be some of the biggest change makers to create the new earth, because we will be able to let go of all the lies of our culture and all the things that are not serving us, and take other aspects of other cultures that we also belong to, or that our ancestors belong to, and create something that is much more harmonious, and basically build a new society. Because, you know, I've definitely been able to do that. Like, I've been able to see, and through traveling as well, going, okay, well, this aspect of, and I've talked about it in my other videos, this aspect of, say, relationships, relationship polarity is great. Like, you know, let's say we talk about how women are so empowered in the West and stuff like that. Well, I don't think it's like very empowering how women have to do everything, how we have to pay 50% of the bills. We're still the ones that have to give birth. We still have to look perfect while we're doing it. Like, body image issues are so exacerbated in the West in a way that they're just not in Eastern cultures and in like more conservative cultures. You know, when you've got a society that's very hypersexualized like Western culture is, you're going to have problems with, you know, insane body image distortions and body dysmorphia, and like just so much plastic surgery that like young girls are getting now. And, you know, I'm not saying that that's also a problem in other cultures as well, but it's like we've lied, you know, we've said that like Western women are so liberated and so empowered, and, you know, I just don't think that that's true 100%. Like, you know, we do enjoy a lot of benefits, but I think it's also great how, you know, in other cultures women expect men to provide. You know, that's a wonderful thing. You know, I don't want to pay 50% of the bills. I don't think it's fair that we have to. We never had to before. I think it absolves men of their responsibilities, but that's a story for another time. That's another video. But it's part of the same thing, because again, decolonisation is not just about like loving the skin you're in and loving your hair. It's also about cultural attitudes, and deciding for yourself how you want to be. Because if you're constantly trying to prove that you're not like other black girls and trying to act more white than you are, that's also about like behavior and stuff like that. Maybe you want to reclaim those aspects of your identity. Maybe you do want to be an angry black woman or an angry brown woman, because that's maybe a part of your identity. Like, I have no, like, for a while I was just like, yeah, it's really messed up how they, like, you know, how white culture will create these stereotypes of like an you know, an angry black woman or an angry brown woman. Like, you know, I think South Asian women, we're kind of somewhere in between, where we get bandied with like the submissive thing, but we also get bandied with like the angry, passionate, like sassy, daddy issues, all of that kind of stuff. And yeah, I'm quite happy to be like, yeah, that's fine. Like, I can be like that. Like, I do have daddy issues. I have ancestral trauma. I am fucking angry about a lot of the shit that's going on in the world. And if you're not angry, then I'm sorry, but like, you've completely lost your humanity. Like, this whole thing about, you know, being polite and, you know, being, you know, showing that you're like not, you know, a dangerous, something to be feared, like just centering white feelings is something that I no longer feel like I have to do. So, you know, even when I'm amongst clients, when they start talking bullshit about, you know, whatever is going on in the mainstream media that I know not to be true, I will just be like, well, actually, blah, 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 blah. And I'll do it. Like, I remember, who was I talking to? She was actually British Pakistani, but they were talking about ISIS, saying something about ISIS. And, oh, it's so messed up what's going on in Syria, isn't it? With ISIS. And I was just like, yeah, it is fucking messed up. We should stop paying taxes to governments who are funding proxy armies who are illegally invading sovereign nations. And they're like, what are you talking about? Just like, well, they're illegally invading Syria. The Free Syrian Army is the sovereign army. That's Assad's army. He's the leader, the democratically elected leader of that country. We got no right to invade them. And they're just like, oh, but it's ISIS invading them. Just like, yeah, but we created ISIS, we funded them. So a lot of that is decolonisation as well. And, you know, not being afraid to speak out against the culture in which you grew up in, and, you know, just expose their lies, even if you're the only person. And I know it's really, really scary when you're the only person of colour in a room and you have to be that person to say, actually, you're lied to. It's hostile. It's really hostile. And yeah, you do feel really, really unsafe. And I've gone through many, many periods where I spoke up and I did feel really unsafe, and I felt bullied and I felt ganged up on. But, you know, you just develop this fire inside where the truth just becomes so much more important. And because I also did the spiritual work, and I realized, you know, that we're multi-dimensional beings, you know, with the constant like meditation that I'm doing and all of the breath work and all of that stuff, I realized, like, I'm a multi-dimensional being. I exist beyond this physical vessel. Is a vessel for truth. And when you go on this journey and you start to uncover the truth of who you are, the truth of who we are as humans, you will no longer fear death, because you know that you exist outside of this physical body, that this physical body is just a vessel. And if people are going to harm you or make you feel unsafe or make you feel uncomfortable for speaking the truth and for being who you are, like, for me personally, I'm okay with that, because that just exposes them for being in my opinion, on the wrong side of history, on the wrong side of truth. They're just wrong because they're incorrect, they're uninformed, and just because they believe the lies of, you know, what their news media is telling them doesn't make it true. Like, if they want me to quote a source on that, like, you know, I don't care. Like, sometimes I will, sometimes I won't, but sometimes you can't always quote a source on something that's been so fragmented that you've had to piece together over 10 years. So don't feel like you have to justify that. You just speak your truth. I'm not telling you that you should put yourself in harm's way, but just really, like, as you start to really, really connect with your ancestors, you will actually feel them with you. Like, you know, watch the video that I made on how to connect with your spirit guides and your ancestors, because when you really start to unpack this internalized racism, you will actually feel their strength with you, and that will actually help you step forward into the world with more power. This is one of the reasons why they colonized us, why they burnt our books, why they obfuscated our spirituality and lied to us about who we were, because we are actually kings and queens. Like, we're gods and goddesses in human form, and we can channel that divine energy and actually create change on this planet. And they're so fucking terrified. And when I say they, I'm not talking about white people, but they have used certain ethnic groups to create a racial hierarchy to divide people. So they will use certain people as pawns to keep you in check. So yes, I do, and yes, I don't mean white people. When you really fully start to embody who you really, really are, you'll feel your ancestors with you and pushing you forward. Yeah, I didn't expect it to go there, but yeah, that's what came through. Yeah, I think that's it. That's all I want to say on that. That's all that's coming through me right now. Also about comparing yourself, beauty standards. You know, stop following people who make you feel bad about yourself. If you constantly feel like you need to look like something else, and I actually feel like it now, because in the last few years since Black Lives Matter became a thing, and since the fashion industry started to realize they're not diverse enough, they've been really, really pushing mixed race girls, so biracial girls, half black, half white. And while I think that's really, really encouraging, it makes me, for example, feel a bit bad about myself because my hair's straight and because I don't have really full lips, and I don't have, I mean, I'm starting to get some freckles now, but I don't look like those girls, you know. I have like a South Asian nose, you know, it's a bit more hooked, it's not like upturned like a lot of these mixed, I don't look like that. So, you know, I sometimes have to kind of tune some of those things out because it makes me feel like I should look a different way than what I do. And I'm sure a lot of white girls are experiencing this now as well, now that, you know, biracial girls are being held up as the, you know, the ideal beauty right now. A lot of people are going to be going through it, and that's why you're seeing a lot of this blackfishing, because yeah, they want to look like you now. So just, you know, stop following people who make you feel like you should look a different way, you know, or don't be afraid to actually like email your favorite brands. Like if there's brands that you follow on Instagram, you know, for me personally, I'm not just going to follow brands just because they represent brown girls, because that might not be the style that I like in terms of how I dress. So don't be afraid to email them sometimes and say, hey, you know, and don't attack, you don't have to be nasty about it, but just be like, I really love your brand, I would love to see some more people that look like me represented, because that would help inspire purchases from me. And you know, they will, like, you know, I've got friends who, you know, now that I'm launching my own brand and I've been doing a lot of content creation for different brands, I talk to a lot of designers, and they really do want to meet your needs, you know, as you're their customer. So if you say to them, I want to see more mixed race girls, I want to see more black girls, I want to see more Indian girls, can you please put some in your campaigns? They will listen. Or I want to see more plus size models, like why don't you have any plus size models? I'm a plus size girl and I'm not feeling included. They will listen. And it's great because, you know, there'll be more work for models like me and models like you know, other friends of mine who don't really get as much work as tall, skinny white girls who have kind of been dominating the industry for far too long. It is getting better though. It's getting a lot better. But yeah, like I said, after a certain point, you won't care anymore. Like, you won't want to be included in their club because you need to start your own club. That's what it is. Like, we just need to start our own clubs. We need to put our focus on ourselves, because when you externalize validation, and this is the same with everything, it's the same with relationships, it's the same with business and, you know, interpersonal friendships, all of that stuff. When you look to other people to include you, they're never going to include you until you really start including yourself in the fullness of who you are. So yeah, so just to summarize, learn your history, connect with your ancestors, travel to the land of your ancestors, even though you feel like you shouldn't have to go back to where you came from. That's also another false trap of this matrix, you know, that you should be just included where you are. Like, there's a reason why you are who you are and why you have the bloodline that you have. So try and reconnect with that. Yeah, that's it. That's all for today. Thanks so much for that question. I really love what came through, and I hope you love it just as much as I do. Share this video and subscribe if you haven't already subscribed. If you like this video, click the thumbs up because it helps boost it in the algorithm. So, you know, sharing love is free, and feel free to suggest other comments. I do want to do next week though, I want to do this video on male body image. So if you have any questions regarding male body image, I would like to get that video out for the person that requested it. Okay guys, love you so much, and I will see you in the next video. One love.
you're introduced to LSD, and unless you've taken some other drug, like for instance, like marijuana or something, well, it's an altogether new thing, and